Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menasce. If you're loving what you're hearing on the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, go out and tell 2 friends today. Show them how easy it is to subscribe to the show. The Real Estate Espresso Podcast can be heard on more than 20 different platforms, and wherever you listen to podcasts, you're sure to find the show. Go out and tell 2 friends today. Spread the love around. Why keep all this goodness to yourself? On today's show, we're talking about how to handle delays. Whether you're stuck in traffic, your flight was canceled, your supplier just told you that a critical component is out of stock, or a 10-minute appointment is going to take a month. Delays seem to be pervasive. Delays cost money, real money. I'm currently developing a vacant lot. There's no underground utilities located on the property, and a previous demolition contractor had ordered the utility locates and confirmed that there were no buried utilities on the property. But it seems the next excavation subcontractor needs to order a new set of utility locates. The backlog for this is 4 weeks, and if the subcontractor can't produce the certificate to the building inspector, they risk expensive fines. The cost of a month delay actually exceeds the cost of the entire excavation project. You might have submitted an application to a government licensing body and been told the process would take 60 days. But then the city experienced a deluge of applications, followed by a staffing shortage, followed by a COVID outbreak, followed by an email outage. You're starting to get the idea, and I'm not making this up. This really happened. The feeling of being out of control can sometimes be consuming. This is the very definition of stress. You see, stress happens when there's a gap between expectation and reality. Stress lives in that gap, and if there's no gap, there can be no stress. If you want to eliminate stress, there's only 2 variables, either expectation or reality. You can control or change the expectation, or you can try and change the reality. Often, reality is out of your control, and so all you're left with is expectation. You can simply eliminate stress by resetting the expectation. But in a sense, while it might eliminate the stress temporarily, it doesn't really solve the underlying problem. When problems like this arise, what is the root cause? What was it? Was it a failure to plan? Was it a lack of understanding of the true dependencies involved in completing a chain of tasks? What was it that caused the stress? What caused the breakdown? Sometimes the dependence between steps in a project are real, and sometimes they're arbitrary. You need to dig a hole before you can pour the foundation. You want your anesthetic before the surgery. You get the idea. But sometimes there's a few rare occasions where you can, in fact, alter the sequence. You can alter that reality. In those rare circumstances, you can resequence activities and mitigate the impact of a delay. Sometimes a dependency that's assumed can be renegotiated or outright broken. Maybe tasks that were assumed to be sequential can in fact be done in parallel. I'll give you a simple example. You might not know which of 2 products to order until a design decision is made. Both of the products have a long lead time, and you don't want to incur the delay of that lead time while you're waiting for your design decision to be made. So what if you went out and you bought both those products, the one that you need and the one that you may not need, and then you simply return the one you don't need? That way you save the time and you're not tied up waiting for that design decision to be made. You can, in fact, have the order lead time and the design happen in parallel. Yeah, you might tie up a bit of extra cash, but you would ultimately save time. The next thing to consider when it comes to managing delays is to determine if you actually have alternatives. Sometimes you get an answer from a supplier that represents an unacceptable delay. But if you have the freedom to substitute an equivalent product or change supplier, then you can sometimes, with a bit of resourcefulness, find a solution. And if the supplier relationship is important to you, you might be able to negotiate with the supplier to use a different supply chain. They might face a lower profit margin, but at least they'll maintain a client. In some cases, if you're waiting for a license or an approval and the bottleneck is a government department, you don't have the alternative to get the approval somewhere else. You can sometimes ask the licensing board if they will provide a contingent license with some exceptions, and those exceptions have to be closed by a certain date. We're dealing with this situation right now. There is extensive delays in getting roof trusses designed in my home market. A stamped engineering drawing for a roof truss is generally considered a requirement for getting a building permit. But the licensing office is recognizing that there's an industry-wide bottleneck, and in many cases, they're allowing permits to be issued even without the stamped engineering drawing if they know a reputable roofing truss company is going to complete the design in time for your construction. But if you don't ask, you're not going to save those weeks and sometimes months of delay. And when all else fails, you can come to the conclusion that sometimes things take longer than they should. And if it costs you more money, you'd better account for those delays in your budget. It means increasing your interest reserves, increasing your maintenance reserves, your operating deficit reserves, all to handle the higher cost of reality being a little bit slower than your hope or expectation. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.